Now, it's been a week of high alert on the Korean Peninsula, with military exercises by the south triggering a fierce reaction from the north and threats of retaliation. The response from North Korea was vitriolic and in line with much of the rhetoric that comes out of Pyongyang. Inside the country, the propaganda machine is well-oiled, highly efficient and extremely effective. A new film, Juche Strong, looks in detail at the ideology of North Korea. We'll be speaking to its director in a few moments' time. But first, here's a quick look at the film for you.
We're constantly getting things wrong with North Korea, so there's something wrong with our understanding of it.
Static selector.
Time for some action. Yeah. But you don't hear me though. Hear me though. Come on, here we go.
What can you hear about North Korea that you haven't heard 1,000 times before? Really only the most important thing, which is what do the North Koreans think and how do they see themselves in the world around them?
Most people are not leaving, and it's not only because people are guarding the borders.
The propaganda of North Korea as the true Korean country, the one that hasn't sold out to the West, is very effective.
So that's just a quick look at the movie Juche, which has been directed by Rob Munson. I'm pleased to say that he joins me now from Washington. And also here in the studio with us is Sue Lloyd-Roberts, who produced an Emmy Award-winning documentary from North Korea for the BBC. Welcome to both of you. Thank you for being with us. Rob, let me begin with you. Your documentary, from what I understand, attempts to demystify the North Korean people, explaining, I suppose, a state of view that you would argue that's been crafted along the lines of a nationalistic ideological basis. But what I'm keen to find out from you is why you believe the West have got it so wrong when it comes to their view of North Korea.
Yeah, well, it's really designed to combat what I think are the two ways that North Korea is typically sort of characterized in the Western media. It's either that they're this sort of childish, bizarre state, or that it's a country that's purely populated by automatons. And I think that the truth of the country is actually much more interesting and actually much more important than that. That this is a country that's populated by 22, 25 million people that are actually much more like us than we typically realize or that we typically acknowledge. And so taking that as the foundational insight, what I tried to do in the film is to explore, well, what precisely is their worldview? I mean, this is a worldview and a national ideology that has been very carefully crafted, very deliberately crafted by the ruling Kim family through some very specifically designed bits of propaganda. And I think that nationalism is certainly one of the essential elements of that worldview, but it's not exclusively that. There's a lot of other individual elements that are part of that propaganda that have been specifically chosen because they tap into the sort of unique and specific cultural history of the Korean people. Yeah, well, Rob, let me bring in Sue, because I know, Sue, you've been inside North Korea and you produced this award-winning documentary for the BBC back in 2010. What struck you most about, I mean, you're listening to Rob there saying that perhaps the view of the West is not the correct one, but what is your feeling about the perspective that we have of North Korea?
It's a dismal perspective, and I think that's right, really. I think that it is a miserable country. If they do sign on to an ideology, I think it's because they just don't know anything else, and I don't think you can emphasize this enough. I met graduates who had never been on the World Wide Web. They didn't know who Barack Obama was. When asked who were the greatest world leaders, they say Stalin and Mao. I mean, there are huge swathes of the country who simply do not know what is happening in the outside world. And so if they are told they are the happiest people on earth, which they're told regularly, how do they know? Who do they compare it with?
Well, how do they know, Rob?
American.
Well, I want to make it clear that my film is not to say that the ideology is the sole source of their power. I think it's actually complementary to several other sort of means of controls there, including sort of hard-nosed control like labor camps and the information corridor and things like that. And I think that it definitely makes them much more likely to believe it, given that it's so difficult for them to get information from the outside world. That being said, the ideology itself and the propaganda that's used to promote that ideology is not done haphazardly. It couldn't just be anything. You couldn't just be telling these people any old story. The Kim family has chosen a very specific story that taps into what the average North Korean is going to be psychologically primed for, given their kind of their cultural history specifically.
Yeah,
so
Yeah, forgive me. I mean, I understand that notion. I mean, obviously, the legacy of the Kim family has lasted for so long that, you know, it absolutely supports that historical narrative that you're explaining. But I suppose the point is about the effect on the people and whether or not they have a choice or they're aware of what's going out in the outside world, as Sue just explained. I mean, I just want to bat some figures to you, Rob. The World Food Programme say that 1 in 3 North Koreans are chronically malnourished or stunted, and it's estimated that in the mid-1990s, 2 million people there died in famine. So what kind of ideological principles are we talking about here?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there is horrific and violent economic mismanagement in that country, and I think that it's a massive tragedy, and in no way is this meant to paper over that. But the essential idea is this, that if you can give people a certain sense of transcendent and spiritual purpose, if you can convince them that they're part of some larger collective project, there's something in us as human beings that makes us willing to undergo a certain level of suffering, undergo a certain amount of sacrifice, if we think it's for some larger collective purpose.
Okay, well, I suppose there's some credence to that notion, isn't there, Sue, given the fact that, you know, we don't see mass defections, do we, from North Korea to South Korea?
You don't see mass defections because it's so difficult to get out. And then, of course, if they're told that they are the luckiest people on earth, they probably think things outside are even worse. It's interesting that if you look at the demographic makeup of those who do escape from North Korea, it's all those who have access to the narrow ribbon of radio access on the demilitarized zone with South Korea and with the border with China. Those who do listen to what's happening outside, they think, hang on, there's a better world out there, and they escape at huge personal risk. One young South Korean I met in Seoul who had successfully escaped told me she took poison with her because she knew that if she was found at the border and handed back, she'd go to a gulag, which is a fate worse than death.
Well, I want to just show our viewers, you capture some extraordinary moments in your documentary. I just want to show some of our viewers one of the points. This is a fascinating exchange. We'll just have a look at it.
The private markets are an embarrassment to the communist government, and anyone who appears to be returning from them loaded with shopping is shooed away from in front of the camera, like this woman with her trolley. What's the matter with him? And a man with a bag on his bike. It's as if shopping for food is a state secret. Whenever I asked to go to the market, I got the same response.
There's no market here. The market is not open at this hour.
Extraordinary stuff. Rob, let me just ask you, I mean, we're talking about a mentality which you explore in your documentary that North Koreans have, which is this us versus them perspective. I mean, yes, you're saying that's based in some sort of solid doctrine based on the political ideology of the regime there, but how long do you think it can last for?
I mean, it's tough, and I always do want to be careful when I say that, at least when I went to North Korea, it's very limited as to what you can see. There's no unguarded moments with average North Koreans. So I don't want to overstate my case, because ultimately the fate of this regime rests upon the very people that, as
Rob, we're going to have to leave it there. I'm so sorry we've run out of time, but Rob and Sue, thank you so much for your time. You've been watching Impact. Do stay with us. Headlines on the way next. We'll see you soon.